You just need 60 seconds, that's all. You're not leaving the country, you're not disappearing into the wilderness. You are walking, maybe 10 feet, to go to the bathroom. Alone, for the first time in what feels like several geological epochs. You set the baby down on the playmat, surrounded by toys, soft music playing in the background, every comfort known to infant civilization carefully arranged around them. You take one step, then another, and then it starts. Not a fuss, not a whimper, a full, soul-rattling, the building is on fire scream, the kind of cry that makes your neighbors consider calling someone. You freeze in the hallway, one hand on the doorframe, and you think, what just happened? Because just last month, this wasn't a thing. Last month, you could set this baby down and they'd stare at the ceiling fan like it was the most profound art installation they'd ever encountered. They were content, independent even. And now they are a different creature entirely. They are what exhausted parents in online forums have started calling a Velcro baby. They stick to you. They track your movements like a tiny, soft-bodied surveillance system. The moment you shift your weight toward the door, their face crumbles. The moment you disappear from their line of sight, even for a second, the panic sets in at a biological, cellular, almost seismic level. Your arms are their habitat. Your chest is their home address. And apparently, you are not allowed to have a bathroom break without a formal appeal process. So, what is actually happening? Is this a phase? Is this your fault? Did you do something to create this tiny screaming shadow that follows your every move? Because here's the thing, this didn't come out of nowhere. There is a reason this starts exactly when it does, at exactly this age, in exactly this way. And when you understand the neuroscience behind it, everything changes. Not just how you see the phase, but how you see your baby, your bond, and honestly, yourself as a parent. So, let's talk about what's really going on inside that small, panicking, perfectly logical brain. The first thing every well-meaning relative is going to tell you is that you're spoiling them, that you've been holding them too much, that if you just let them cry it out, they'll learn to be independent. And look, this advice comes from a place of love. It also comes from a place of being completely, scientifically, demonstrably wrong. You cannot spoil an infant. That is not a parenting opinion. That is developmental biology. The American Academy of Pediatrics has been clear on this for decades. Responding to a baby's distress doesn't create dependency. It creates security. Ignoring a baby who is crying from genuine fear doesn't teach them independence. It teaches them that fear is something they face alone. That is not a lesson you want to install in a brain that's still being built in real time. But here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't even really about behavior at all. What you're watching isn't your baby acting out. It isn't manipulation. It isn't a bad habit forming because you were too responsive, too present, too loving. What you are witnessing is a biological milestone, as significant as the first tooth, the first step, the first word. Something just switched on inside your baby's brain, a system that was always meant to activate right on schedule as part of a developmental sequence that evolution has been refining for roughly 200,000 years. Your baby isn't clingy because something went wrong. Your baby is clingy because something went exactly right. In the 1950s, a Swiss psychologist named Jean Piaget made a discovery that would reshape everything we thought we knew about how babies experience reality. He called it object permanence, and the concept is deceptively simple. It means understanding that things continue to exist even when you can't see them. You know your keys are still in your bag even when you're not looking at them. You know your coffee is still on the counter even when you've left the room. That knowledge, that invisible things still exist, is not something you were born with. It is something your brain had to learn. And according to Piaget's research, most babies don't develop this ability until somewhere between 8 and 12 months of age. Before that point, the world operates on a completely different set of rules. So try to imagine for a moment what your baby's reality actually feels like before that cognitive switch flips. When you walk out of the room, you don't just leave, you cease to exist, completely, utterly, with no explanation and no guarantee of return. One moment you are there, warm, familiar, the single most important sensory anchor in their entire universe. And the next moment, there is nothing where you used to be. Developmental researchers sometimes describe this experience as falling into what they call an existential void. The person who means everything to them has simply vanished from reality. There is no "mommy went to the kitchen." There is no "daddy will be right back." There is only gone. And gone, to a pre-object permanence brain, is permanent, every single time. And when that happens, when you disappear, your baby's brain doesn't quietly note your absence and move on. It fires. Deep inside the limbic system, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, goes into full emergency mode. Neuroscientists call this an amygdala hijack. It's the same neurological event that happens in adults during a genuine life-threatening crisis. Heart rate spikes, cortisol floods the system, every non-essential function shuts down. Because to your baby's brain, this is not an inconvenience. This is not mild discomfort. This is a survival emergency. The primary caregiver, the source of food, warmth, protection, and everything required to stay alive, has vanished without a trace. The alarm that goes off is proportional to that threat, which is why the scream sounds like the world is ending, because in their neurology, it is. Now, why does this happen specifically between 8 and 12 months? Why not earlier? Why not later? This is where the developmental timeline becomes almost elegantly precise. Before 8 months, babies don't yet have the cognitive complexity to register your absence as a threat. The circuitry simply isn't online yet. But somewhere around that 8-month mark, two things happen simultaneously. The brain's prefrontal cortex begins developing enough to form strong, specific attachments to particular people. And the amygdala becomes sophisticated enough to recognize and react to the loss of those people. It's as if the emotional hardware upgrades before the rational software catches up. Your baby now knows exactly who you are and exactly how much they need you. They just don't yet know that you always come back. Here is what makes this even more profound. This response, this panic, this screaming, this full-body distress at your absence is not a flaw in the system. It is the system working perfectly. For the vast majority of human history, a baby left alone was a baby in mortal danger. Predators, exposure, starvation. The infants who screamed loudest when separated from their caregivers were the ones most likely to be found, retrieved, and kept alive. The ones who stayed quiet didn't make it. What you are hearing when your baby cries for you is 200,000 years of evolutionary engineering doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your modern apartment is safe. Your baby's ancient brain doesn't know that yet. It is calibrated for a world that no longer exists, and it is doing its job flawlessly. And all of this, the attachment, the panic, the separation distress, is being wired into your baby's brain right now, in real time, through a process neuroscientists at Harvard's Center on the Developing Child describe as serve and return. Every time your baby calls out and you respond, a neural connection is reinforced. Every time the fear spikes and then resolves, because you came back, the brain slowly begins building what researchers call an internal working model of relationships, a template, a foundational belief about whether the world is safe, whether people can be trusted, and whether love is reliable. The clinginess isn't just a phase you're surviving. It is the raw material from which your child's emotional architecture is being constructed right now, in these exact moments that feel so exhausting and so endless. Baltimore, Maryland, 1969. A developmental psychologist named Mary Ainsworth sets up what looks, on the surface, like an ordinary playroom. Toys on the floor, a chair for the parent, a chair for a stranger, 2 doors. Hidden cameras positioned to capture every micro-expression, every reach, every flinch. Over the following months, she will bring in hundreds of mothers and their infants, babies between 12 and 18 months old, and she will put them through a carefully choreographed sequence of separations and reunions. She will call it the strange situation. And what she is about to discover will become one of the most cited, most replicated, most consequential studies in the entire history of developmental psychology.
Because what happens in that room, in those few minutes when the door closes, turns out to reveal something fundamental about the human bond. The protocol is precise. Mother and baby enter the room together. They have a few minutes to settle. Then a stranger enters. Then, and this is the moment everything hinges on, the mother gets up, quietly, and leaves the room. The door closes behind her, and the cameras keep rolling. What happens in the next 3 minutes is where the data lives. Cortisol levels, the biological marker of stress, spike in virtually every single infant the moment that door closes. Heart rates climb. Some babies freeze. Some crawl frantically toward the door. Some collapse onto the floor in full distress. The stranger attempts to comfort them. In most cases, it doesn't work. Not really, not deeply, because the stranger is not the person the amygdala is screaming for. The room is the same. The toys are the same. But the one variable that mattered most is gone, and the baby's entire nervous system knows it. What Ainsworth observed next is where the study becomes genuinely revelatory. Not all babies reacted the same way. Some cried intensely but calmed relatively quickly when the mother returned, seeking contact, accepting comfort, then gradually returning to play. Ainsworth called these babies securely attached. Others seemed almost indifferent to the mother's return, turning away, refusing comfort, as if they had already learned that expressing need was not safe. She called this avoidant attachment. And then there were the babies who were inconsolable, clinging desperately to the returning mother while simultaneously pushing her away, unable to be soothed, stuck in a loop of need and anger that seemed to have no off switch. Anxious attachment. 3 distinct patterns, 3 different internal working models of what relationships mean, all of them visible in a 3-minute separation in a room in Baltimore in 1969. The conclusion that emerged from Ainsworth's work and from the decades of research that followed it was both simple and staggering. The way a baby responds to separation is not random. It is not temperament. It is not personality. It is a learned response, a direct reflection of the attachment pattern that has been built through thousands of daily interactions in the months prior. Which means the clingy baby, the baby screaming at the door, the baby who cannot bear to let you out of sight, that baby is not broken. That baby is not spoiled. That baby is demonstrating in the most raw and unfiltered way possible that they have formed a deep, real, neurologically significant bond with another human being. The clinginess is the data, and the data says, this relationship matters. Here is something nobody tells you in the middle of the hard part. Separation anxiety, the real neurological, amygdala-driven kind, is correlated with higher cognitive development. The babies who experience it most intensely are, almost universally, the babies whose brains have developed enough to form complex, specific, deeply meaningful attachments. It requires sophisticated memory to miss someone. It requires advanced emotional processing to feel the weight of an absence. When your baby loses it the moment you leave the room, they are demonstrating that their brain has reached a level of development where they can hold a mental representation of you, your face, your smell, your voice, your warmth, and feel the acute pain of its absence. That is not weakness, that is cognition. That is your baby's brain doing something genuinely remarkable and doing it right on schedule. Mary Ainsworth's most enduring contribution to developmental science wasn't just the strange situation study. It was the concept she built around it, what she called the secure base. The idea is this: a child who feels securely attached to a caregiver doesn't become more dependent over time. They become more independent. Because when a child trusts that their safe base is reliable, that you will always come back, that reaching for you will always be met, they develop the internal confidence to venture further, explore more, take bigger risks. The clinginess of today is quite literally the foundation of the independence of tomorrow. You're not creating a child who needs you forever. You are creating a child who knows, at a neurological level, that the world is a safe enough place to explore. That knowledge starts here, in these exact moments, in the way you respond right now. And so, to you, the parent reading this at 11:30 at night with a baby asleep on your chest because that was the only way anyone was getting any rest tonight, To you who has not used the bathroom alone in what feels like months, who has Googled, "Am I spoiling my baby?" more times than you'd like to admit, who has stood in the hallway listening to that cry and felt simultaneously needed and completely overwhelmed by the weight of being needed this much. Here is what the science is telling you, plainly and without qualification. You did not create this. You cannot fix it by pulling away. The fact that your baby falls apart when you leave is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence, biological, neurological, evolutionary evidence that you have become the most important thing in another person's entire world. That is not a burden. That is the bond. And it is working exactly the way it was always supposed to.
So what do you actually do with all of this in the real world on a Tuesday morning when you need to make breakfast and your baby has decided that 3 inches of separation is 3 inches too many? First, practice what developmental researchers call predictable departures. Don't sneak out. Don't disappear while they're distracted. Say goodbye every time, even when it feels cruel, even when the cry that follows breaks something in your chest. Research consistently shows that babies who experience predictable, narrated separations, "Mommy is going to the kitchen, I'll be right back," develop object permanence faster and regulate separation distress more effectively than babies whose caregivers simply vanish. You are not prolonging the pain by saying goodbye. You are building the neural pathway that eventually makes goodbye bearable. Second, play peekaboo. Seriously, it is not just a game. It is a controlled, low-stakes rehearsal for object permanence. Every time your face disappears behind your hands and then reappears, your baby's brain logs one more data point. Things that disappear come back. You are literally training the anxiety out of them, one giggle at a time. Third, create a transitional anchor, a specific blanket, a familiar scent, a consistent caregiver who is always the same person when you're gone. The brain craves pattern. Pattern signals safety. Safety quiets the amygdala. Now, when should you actually be concerned? Because while separation anxiety is universal and developmentally normal, there are signals worth paying attention to. If your baby shows no separation distress whatsoever, no preference for you over strangers, no reaction to your absence at any point between 8 and 18 months, that is worth mentioning to your pediatrician, as it can sometimes indicate delays in social-emotional development. On the other end, if the anxiety is so severe that your baby cannot be soothed at all upon your return, if they are not eating, not sleeping, consistently inconsolable for extended periods even in your presence, or if the intensity of distress doesn't show any gradual improvement past 18 to 24 months, those are moments to loop in a professional. Not because something is certainly wrong, but because you deserve support, and so does your child. For the vast majority of families, though, this phase peaks, plateaus, and fades, usually by the end of the second year, leaving behind exactly what it was always building, a child who knows, in their bones, that you are safe. There is an invisible thread that runs between you and your baby. You can't see it. You can't measure it on any instrument. But your baby has known it was there from the very beginning. And right now, in this phase, in this loud and exhausting and deeply inconvenient season of clinginess and separation screams and bathroom breaks that require a strategic exit plan, what they are doing is pulling on it, testing it, making sure it holds. And every time you come back, every single time you reappear in that doorway and say, "I'm here, I'm always here," you are answering the most fundamental question another human being will ever ask you. Not with words, with presence, with pattern, with the quiet, accumulated weight of showing up again and again until their nervous system finally believes what their heart already knows, that you are not going anywhere, that the void is not permanent, that love, real, reliable, neurologically anchored love, always comes back. If this gave you something tonight, a little science, a little breathing room, a new way to see the baby who won't let you put them down, then subscribe, because this is what we do here. We take the hardest parts of early parenthood and we show you what's actually happening underneath them. And speaking of hard parts, if you think the clinginess is intense, wait until your baby starts hitting. Not strangers, not objects. You, the person they love most.
It seems shocking, it seems wrong, but the neuroscience behind why babies strike the people they're most attached to is one of the most fascinating and most misunderstood chapters in infant development. That's the next video. And trust me, the science is even more surprising than this one. Click on the video on the screen to watch it, and we'll see you there.